The ideology which underlies science, as it now is based on 10 dogmas or assumptions. They started off as assumptions, and they've gradually hardened into dogmas. And those are what I'm going to be talking about, because it turns out that every one of these dogmas is very questionable. And what I'm going to do is turn it into a question, look at its foundations, look at the alternatives, and see how science can be freed more easily from these constricting assumptions. My book on this subject in English is called The Science Delusion. And the reason it's called the Science Delusion is that the delusion of science is the belief that science has already explained the nature of reality in principle, leaving only the details to be filled in. In the United States, the same book is called Science Set Free, which is a more positive take on the title. Actually, I prefer the American title, because what I'm saying is that science has become increasingly dogmatic, and the dogmas are now constricting the scientific endeavor, restricting what scientists can explore, and science has been hemmed in and cramped by these assumptions. I'm in favor of science. I'm not in favor of it dominating all nature, because what we've seen through the climate crisis and pollution and the extinction that's going on all around us is the effects of uncontrolled scientific power and technological power. Obviously, we need to change that, and we're going to have to use science and technology to help us change it. So we're not going to be able to escape from science and technology, but we have to think carefully about what they're doing and where they could go. Well, the 10 assumptions on which science is based are firstly the idea that nature is mechanical, that nature is machine-like, and that everything in nature is based on mechanical principles of mindless mechanical activity. The second assumption is that matter is unconscious. The whole universe is made of matter, and this matter has no mind or consciousness anywhere within it. The stars are unconscious, the galaxies are unconscious, animals are unconscious, they're just machines. The whole of life is just machinery. It's called mechanistic biology, is the subject that studies it. The third assumption is that the total amount of matter and energy in the universe is completely fixed. All of it appeared from nowhere at the moment of the Big Bang, and the total amount has remained the same ever since. And this is called the law of conservation of matter and energy, or the principle of conservation of matter and energy. The next assumption is that the so-called laws of nature are eternal, that the laws that govern the falling of rocks, the growth of plants, the refraction of light, the emission of light from heated sodium, for example, as in sodium lamps, all the phenomena of nature, the nature of nerve impulses, all these things are governed by laws that were all there at the moment of the Big Bang, like a kind of Napoleonic code. Of course, no one was there at the moment of the Big Bang to study these laws, so this is simply an assumption. We couldn't possibly have observed it directly. The next assumption is that nature is purposeless. There's no purposes in nature at all. The whole of cosmic evolution has happened with no purpose or direction. And again, this is something that hasn't been proved. It's just an assumption, because the universe is supposed to be a machine, and machines don't have purposes of their own. They simply reflect the purposes of the beings that have made them. In the 17th century, scientists thought that the machinery of the universe had been made by God. But by the 19th century, many of them had got rid of God, this machine-making God, and simply had the laws of nature as eternal truths. Somehow coming into being with all the matter and energy of the universe at the moment of the Big Bang. As my friend Terence McKenna liked to say, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle was the appearance of all the laws of nature and all the matter and energy in the universe from nothing in a single instant. The sixth assumption is that all biological inheritance is material, that everything we inherit is materially present in the sperm and the eggs, especially in the fertilized egg. And this is normally thought of in terms of genes. Most people use the word hereditary and genetic as if they're synonyms. So it's material inheritance. And related to that, the seventh assumption is that all our memories are material things inside our brains. Everything you remember about what you learned yesterday, where you went on holiday 2 years ago, the facts you learned at school, the skills you learned, like riding bicycles or driving cars or taking part in sports, playing tennis, for example, or skiing, all these memories are somehow etched physically, materially, inside your brain. That follows from the materialist worldview. Everything has to be material, therefore memories are material. And of course, if your memories are all in your brain, then when you die and the brain decays, all your memories are wiped out. So since you won't be you without any of your memories, that basically means no survival of bodily death. So all religious beliefs on survival of various kinds, purgatory, reincarnation, judgment, all sorts of things like that, are simply wiped out at one stroke by the doctrine that memories are material traces in the brain. Most people simply take that for granted as if it's common sense. But as I shall be discussing later, this is very far from being established, and the evidence is actually rather strongly against it. Then the next assumption is that the mind is nothing but the activity of the brain. Consciousness is simply a product of matter. Matter is the primary reality, and the mind is nothing but the brain. It's all inside the head. So everything you see and experience, as you see and hear me now, for example, there's somehow your brain is producing an image of a little Rupert on a screen with all the words I'm saying, all inside your head. They're not out there. When you look out around you, as I look out of the window now and I see a tree, that image of the tree is not where it seems to be, beyond the window, blowing in the wind, but somehow inside my head in some kind of virtual reality display that the nervous system has produced. Again, this is a highly questionable doctrine, and we'll come back to it later. Then, following from that assumption that the mind's nothing but the brain, is the assumption that psychic phenomena like telepathy are illusory. The thoughts and intentions in your brain can't possibly, according to this assumption, affect somebody many miles away. So if people claim to have telepathic experiences, picking up intentions of people from far away, if dogs, for example, pick up the intention of their owner to come home and start waiting for the owner, or if you pick up the intention of someone to ring you on the phone, then that is not really telepathy. It's just an illusion, a coincidence, or a superstition. It can't possibly be true. And there's nothing that annoys dogmatic materialists more than the suggestion that telepathy might exist. It's like a litmus paper for dogmatic materialism. Most people take it for granted because they experience it, but dogmatic materialists get upset, angry, and go into a kind of paroxysm of denial at the idea that such a thing could exist, because if it did, it would strike at the very root of their belief system. Then, finally, there's the assumption that mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. The body is nothing but a physico-chemical machine, so the only way you can treat it is through physics and chemistry, surgery or drugs. And all alternative therapies are fake. They're charlatan. They're done by charlatans. They can't possibly do anything real. At best, they produce a placebo effect. So This, again, is not something that's just an academic opinion that a few people believe. It affects medical research policy and medical policy. Here in Britain, the Medical Research Council spends almost £1 billion a year of public money on medical research. But how much does it spend on alternative and complementary medicine? The answer, practically nothing at all, because it's assumed in advance that these are worthless, valueless, quack remedies. The only thing that really matters is medicine, and especially molecular medicine, looking at the molecular level. That's the basis of the Francis Crick Institute, in which the British Medical Research Council has centralised its activities, named after the discoverer of the structure of DNA, the genetic molecule. So these are essentially the assumptions on which science is based. And most people assume they must be true because science is so successful. But actually, science is perfectly capable of changing its worldview. The great historian of science, Thomas Kuhn, in his famous book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, in 1962, showed that scientific revolutions occur when a paradigm, a model of reality, is replaced by a different model of reality. Like the classic example of the Copernican revolution, people thought that the planets and the stars revolved around the Earth at the center of the universe. The Copernican revolution was that the sun was the center of the solar system, the Earth revolved around the sun, and the other stars were suns like our own, in vast numbers. It was a huge change in thinking. The Darwinian theory of evolution was another such paradigm shift. And one paradigm shift that occurred in the 20th century was the shift from determinism. In the 19th century, scientists believed that, in principle, science could predict everything about nature. The famous French physicist Laplace imagined that if there was a superhuman intelligence that knew the position of all the particles in the universe and all the laws of nature, it could predict the entire future of the universe, including thoughts in human brains, and the entire past, just by calculation. Everything was fixed and determined. And the famous biologist T.H. Huxley, sometimes called Darwin's bulldog for his aggressive promotion of evolution as an anti-religious doctrine, believed that intelligence sufficiently large could calculate not only the positions of the stars and planets, but the exact details of the animals and plants living in England in 1869 on the basis of knowing the past of everything. It could predict the future of everything. Everything was basically predictable. All the activity in your brain was, in principle, predictable physically, meaning you had no free will. Well, that doctrine of total determinism was widely believed in the 19th century. In fact, it was one of the fantasies of scientific omniscience that occur again and again in the course of the history of science. But in the 20th century, it was undermined first by quantum theory, showing that you can only predict microphysical events probabilistically in terms of probability, not exactly. And secondly, by the development of chaos and complexity theory, which revealed that vast amounts of nature, including the breaking of waves, the dripping of taps, the evolution itself based on chance, random quantum event mutations, the weather, are inherently unpredictable. They can only be predicted in terms of probabilities. And so science has had to give up that particular dogma. And I think it's going to have to give up these 10 other dogmas that I've outlined today.
Find out more on advire.life.